I thought we were trying for a baby, but my husband was secretly meeting his ex-wife and knew he was infertile. When I left, he broke down and revealed even more shocking lies. I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet. But here I am, Madeline, 28 years old, married for 2 years to Nelson, 34, and completely lost about what to do next. Our love story began 5 years ago at a local farmer's market. I was examining a bunch of heirloom tomatoes when I accidentally bumped into Nelson, causing him to drop his reusable shopping bag. As we scrambled to pick up his scattered produce, our eyes met, and we both burst into laughter. It was one of those movie-perfect moments that I'll never forget. We started dating soon after, and everything seemed perfect. Nelson was charming, attentive, and we shared so many common interests. We both loved hiking. Our second date was a challenging trek up Mount Rainier, where we watched the sunrise together from the summit. We enjoyed trying new restaurants, always on the hunt for hidden gems in the city. We dreamed of traveling the world together, planning imaginary trips to far-flung destinations over bottles of wine on lazy Sunday afternoons. Nelson had been married once before, to his high school sweetheart, Natalie. They were together for 5 years before divorcing 7 years ago. He didn't talk much about her or their relationship when we were dating, only mentioning that things ended badly and he had no desire to ever see her again. I respected his privacy and didn't push for more information, even though I was curious about the woman who had come before me. Our courtship was a whirlwind of romantic gestures and shared adventures. Nelson proposed on our 3rd anniversary, during a surprise hot air balloon ride over the Napa Valley. I said yes without hesitation, certain that I had found my soulmate. Our first year of marriage was wonderful. We bought a small house in the suburbs, a charming 1920s bungalow that needed some work but had great bones. We spent weekends painting walls, refinishing hardwood floors, and planting a vegetable garden in the backyard. We adopted a dog, a goofy Labrador mix named Charlie, from the local shelter. Everything seemed to be falling into place. We both wanted children, so we decided to start trying about 6 months ago. That's when things began to change, so subtly at first that I barely noticed. Nelson seemed a bit more distant, less affectionate. I chalked it up to work stress. He had recently taken on a new project at his job as a software engineer, leading a team developing a revolutionary AI application. He was working longer hours, often coming home well after dinner time. I tried to be understanding, keeping his plate warm and offering a sympathetic ear when he wanted to vent about work politics. But as the months passed and I still wasn't pregnant, his behavior became increasingly concerning. After each negative pregnancy test, Nelson would become moody and withdrawn. He'd avoid me for days, barely speaking beyond necessary communication. When he did talk, it was often to make snide comments about how quickly Natalie had gotten pregnant when they were trying. I was shocked. He had never mentioned children with Natalie before. These comparisons to Natalie became more frequent and hurtful. According to Nelson, Natalie was a better cook, more organized, more fun at parties. It felt like he was constantly measuring me against this idealized version of his ex-wife, and I always came up short. I tried talking to Nelson about how his words were affecting me, but he dismissed my concerns. He said I was being too sensitive and that he was just trying to help me improve. I felt like I was losing myself, constantly trying to live up to this impossible standard he had set. I started doubting myself in ways I never had before. I've always been a confident person. I have a successful career in marketing, a close-knit group of friends, and I've always been comfortable in my own skin. But Nelson's constant criticism was eroding my self-esteem. I found myself second-guessing every decision, from what to wear to a client meeting to how to arrange the throw pillows on our couch. The final straw came last week. We had gone to a friend's barbecue, a casual gathering of couples from our neighborhood. I spent the afternoon chatting with the other guests, helping our hostess in the kitchen, and playing with the kids in the backyard. Nelson, on the other hand, spent most of the time huddled around the grill with the other men, drinking beer after beer. On the way home, Nelson had too much to drink and started ranting about how Natalie would have charmed everyone at the party, unlike me who he claimed had been awkward and boring. He went on and on about how Natalie always knew the right thing to say, how she could work a room like a seasoned politician. According to Nelson, I had embarrassed him with my social ineptitude. When we got home, I finally snapped. I told him if Natalie was so perfect, maybe he should have stayed with her. I was tired of being compared to a woman I'd never met, tired of feeling like I was constantly falling short of some impossible standard. To my surprise, Nelson broke down crying. Through his sobs, he admitted that Natalie had left him, not the other way around. He said she claimed he was controlling and manipulative, always comparing her to his previous girlfriends. I was stunned. It was exactly what he was doing to me. I've spent the last week in a daze, trying to process this information. I love Nelson, or at least I thought I did. But now I'm questioning everything about our relationship. Was I just a replacement for Natalie? Has he been manipulating me this whole time? I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to fight for our marriage, to suggest counseling and work through this. But another part of me is so hurt and angry that I just want to leave. I haven't told any of my friends or family about this yet. I'm embarrassed and confused. I keep thinking back to all the times Nelson made me feel inadequate, all the times I doubted myself because of his words. It makes me sick to think that this might have been his plan all along, to slowly erode my self-esteem until I became totally dependent on him. I'm also worried about the future. We've been trying for a baby, but now I'm relieved it hasn't happened yet. I can't imagine bringing a child into this situation. But I'm almost 29, and I've always wanted to be a mother. If I leave Nelson, will I be giving up my chance at having a family? I know I need to make a decision, but I feel paralyzed. Should I confront Nelson about what he told me? Should I reach out to Natalie to get her side of the story? Or should I just pack my bags and leave while he's at work one day? Any advice would be appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of doubts and fears, and I don't know which way to swim. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I feel like I've lived a lifetime in these 14 days. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Your comments helped me see things more clearly and gave me the courage to take action. The day after I made my post, I decided to confront Nelson about what he had said at the barbecue. I spent the entire day rehearsing what I would say, pacing our living room and muttering to myself like a madwoman. When Nelson came home from work, I asked him to sit down for a serious talk. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I told him that his behavior had been unacceptable and that I knew about what really happened with Natalie. I half expected him to get angry, to deny everything, maybe even to storm out. But his reaction was not what I expected at all. Instead of getting defensive or angry, Nelson broke down completely. He collapsed onto the couch, his body racked with sobs. Between gasps for air, he admitted that he had been struggling with depression and anxiety ever since his divorce from Natalie. He said he never dealt with those feelings properly and instead projected his insecurities onto me. As I sat there, watching my husband fall apart, I felt a confusing mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to hold him and tell him everything would be okay. But another part of me was still angry, still hurt by his treatment of me over the past months. Then Nelson revealed something that shocked me to my core. The reason Natalie left him wasn't just because of his controlling behavior, it was because they found out he was infertile. Nelson had known all along that he couldn't have children, but he never told me. All those months of trying to get pregnant, all the stress and disappointment, were for nothing. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at Nelson, this man I thought I knew, as he continued to sob on our couch. When I finally found my voice, I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I asked him why he had lied to me, why he had let me believe we were trying for a baby when he knew it was impossible. Nelson's answer was both infuriating and heartbreaking. He said he was afraid of losing me, afraid that if I knew the truth, I would leave him like Natalie did. He thought that if we kept trying, maybe a miracle would happen, or maybe I would just give up on the idea of having children. I was furious. I felt betrayed and lied to. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't my fault that we couldn't conceive. The problem had never been with me. All those nights I had spent crying, convinced that my body was failing me, had been for nothing. Nelson begged for forgiveness. He promised to get help, to see a therapist and work on his issues. He said he loved me and couldn't bear to lose me like he lost Natalie. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to believe that we could work through this. But a larger part of me knew that too much damage had been done. I told Nelson I needed some time to think. I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister, Claire. Being away from Nelson and our house has given me some much-needed perspective. Claire has been incredibly supportive, letting me cry on her shoulder and helping me sort through my feelings. While staying with Claire, I did something I never thought I would do. I reached out to Natalie. I found her on social media and sent her a message explaining who I was and asking if she would be willing to talk. To my surprise, she agreed to meet for coffee. Meeting Natalie was surreal. She was nothing like the perfect woman Nelson had described. She was just a normal person, with her own flaws and insecurities. We talked for hours, our coffee going cold as we shared our stories. She told me about her relationship with Nelson, how he slowly chipped away at her self-esteem, always comparing her to his exes or to some impossible ideal. It was like listening to someone describe my own marriage. I felt a connection with this woman I had once seen as a rival. Natalie also told me something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, Nelson had known about his infertility long before they got married. He had hidden it from her too, letting her believe for years that she was the one with the problem. When she finally found out the truth, it was the last straw in their already strained marriage. As I listened to Natalie's story, I felt a mix of emotions. I was angry at Nelson for repeating the same pattern with me, for not learning from his mistakes. But I also felt a deep sadness for him. What kind of pain and insecurity must he be carrying to treat the women he claims to love this way? Talking to Natalie has made me realize that I can't stay with Nelson. The trust between us is irreparably broken. He lied to me about something fundamental to our relationship, knowing how much I wanted children. And his emotional manipulation, comparing me to Natalie just like he compared her to his exes, is not something I can forgive. I'm meeting with a lawyer next week to discuss my options for divorce. I'm scared about the future, but I also feel a sense of hope that I haven't felt in a long time. I know now that I deserve better than what Nelson has been giving me. As I write this update, sitting at Claire's kitchen table with a cup of tea, I feel a strange mix of sadness and relief. My marriage is ending, and that's painful. But I also feel like I'm waking up from a long, bad dream. I'm rediscovering who I am without Nelson's criticisms ringing in my ears. I'll update again once I've spoken to the lawyer and figured out my next steps. Thank you all again for your support. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and things have been moving quickly. I met with the lawyer as planned, and we've started the process of filing for divorce. It's been emotionally draining, but I know it's the right decision. When I returned home to tell Nelson about my decision, I found him in a state I've never seen before. The house was a mess, with takeout containers and empty bottles scattered everywhere. Nelson was slumped on the couch, unshaven and disheveled, looking like he hadn't showered in days. The sight of him, so far from the put-together man I married, made my heart ache despite everything. When I told him I wanted a divorce, his reaction was volatile. He alternated between begging me to stay and angrily blaming me for everything. He accused me of giving up on our marriage, of not loving him enough to work through our problems. Then, in the next breath, he would fall to his knees, pleading for another chance and promising to change. In his drunken state, Nelson revealed even more lies. It turns out, he had been in contact with Natalie throughout our entire relationship. They weren't romantically involved, but they had been meeting occasionally for coffee or lunch. He claimed it was just to check in on each other, but I find it hard to believe there wasn't more to it. This new revelation felt like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Any lingering doubts I had about my decision to leave vanished. I realized that Nelson had never truly let go of Natalie, that I had always been competing with a ghost. I was hurt and angry, but mostly I felt pity for Nelson. He's clearly a deeply troubled person who needs professional help. I suggested he seek therapy, not for us, but for himself. He reluctantly agreed, which I hope is a step in the right direction for him. The divorce proceedings have been surprisingly smooth so far. Nelson isn't contesting anything, which I'm grateful for. We're selling the house and splitting the proceeds. It's bittersweet. I loved that little bungalow and all the dreams it represented. But now it feels tainted by the lies and pain of the past year. I'm looking for an apartment closer to my job in the city. The idea of starting fresh in a new place is both exciting and terrifying. I've never lived alone before, having gone from my parents' house to college dorms to roommates to marriage. But I'm looking forward to creating a space that's entirely my own. One unexpected positive outcome of this whole ordeal is my newfound friendship with Natalie. We've continued to meet up and talk, and it's been incredibly healing for both of us. We've bonded over our shared experiences with Nelson and supported each other through the emotional fallout. Natalie has been married for 3 years now to a wonderful man, and they have a 2-year-old daughter. Seeing her happy family has been bittersweet for me. While I'm thrilled that she found happiness after Nelson, it's a painful reminder of the future I thought I would have. I've started seeing a therapist to work through my feelings about the divorce and the loss of my dream of having children. It's been helpful, and I'm slowly starting to reimagine what my future might look like. I'm considering looking into adoption or fostering once I'm in a better place emotionally and financially. For now, I'm focusing on healing and rediscovering who I am outside of my relationship with Nelson. I've rekindled old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage, and I've even started taking a pottery class, something I've always wanted to try but Nelson dismissed as pointless. As I sit here writing this update, I'm struck by how much has changed in just a month. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty feels more exciting than scary. I know I have a long road ahead of me, but I'm ready to face it. I'll update again once the divorce is finalized and I'm settled into my new place. Thank you all for your continued support and kind words. They've been a lifeline during this difficult time. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm happy to report that my divorce from Nelson was finalized last week. The process was draining, both emotionally and financially, but I'm relieved it's over. Nelson and I managed to settle most things amicably. We sold the house and split the proceeds. I used my share as a down payment on a small condo in the city. It's closer to my job and friends, and it feels like a fresh start. The condo is in an old converted warehouse, with high ceilings and exposed brick walls. It's a far cry from the suburban bungalow Nelson and I shared, but that's exactly what I needed, something completely different to mark this new chapter in my life. Decorating my new place has been therapeutic. I've filled it with colors and textures that I love, without worrying about anyone else's opinions. There's a large painting of a windswept beach hanging in my living room, a reminder of the peaceful solitude I'm learning to embrace. Nelson has been continuing with therapy, and from what I've heard through mutual friends, he's making progress. He sent me a letter apologizing for his behavior during our marriage. While I appreciate the gesture, I'm not ready to forgive him fully. Maybe someday, but not now. Reading his words brought up a mix of emotions, sadness for what we lost, anger at the time wasted, but also a sense of closure. I hope he continues to work on himself and finds happiness, but I know now that his journey is no longer my responsibility. As for me, I've been focusing on personal growth and healing. My therapist has been incredibly helpful in working through my trust issues and rebuilding my self-esteem. We've been exploring the patterns in my past relationships and why I was drawn to someone like Nelson. It's been challenging work, often leaving me emotionally drained after sessions, but I can feel myself getting stronger with each passing week. I've also joined a support group for people going through divorce, which has been a great source of comfort and understanding. Listening to others share their stories has helped me feel less alone in this process. It's also given me perspective. Hearing about others who have come out the other side of divorce and found happiness has been inspiring. I've made some big changes in my life. I quit my job at the marketing firm where I'd worked for the past 5 years and started my own freelance business. It's scary but exciting, and I'm enjoying the freedom and challenge it brings. My first few clients have been small local businesses, and I love being able to help them grow. There's something empowering about building something from scratch, about proving to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. I've also started volunteering at a local animal shelter. It's been incredibly rewarding, and it's helped fill the void left by not having children. Working with the animals has taught me a lot about unconditional love and living in the moment. I've even adopted a cat, a sweet older girl named Luna who had been at the shelter for months. She's been great company as I adjust to living alone. Her gentle purring and warm presence have been a comfort on nights when the silence of my new home feels overwhelming. My friendship with Natalie has continued to grow. She's been an incredible support through all of this. Last month, she invited me to her daughter's 3rd birthday party. Being around kids is still a bit painful, but it's getting easier. I'm starting to accept that my path to motherhood might look different than I originally planned, and that's okay. Watching Natalie with her daughter, I can see the joy that motherhood brings, but I can also see the challenges. It's helped me realize that there's no one right way to live a fulfilling life. I've started dating again, very casually. It's strange and a little scary to put myself out there, but it's also exciting. I'm taking things slow and being very upfront about my past and what I'm looking for in a relationship. I've had a few coffee dates, nothing serious yet, but it's nice to be reminded that there are kind, interesting people out there. Each date feels like a small step towards trusting again. Looking back on the past year, I'm amazed at how much has changed. There were moments when I thought I wouldn't make it through, when the pain and betrayal felt too overwhelming. But I did make it through, and I'm stronger for it. I've learned that I'm more resilient than I ever knew, that I'm capable of rebuilding my life on my own terms. I know there will still be tough days ahead. I'm still working on fully trusting others and myself. There are moments when I catch myself falling into old patterns of self-doubt, but now I have the tools to recognize and challenge those thoughts. I'm learning to be kinder to myself, to celebrate my progress rather than focusing on perceived shortcomings. But for the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely hopeful about the future. I'm rediscovering who I am and what I want out of life, and it feels incredible. I'm no longer trying to fit myself into someone else's idea of who I should be. Instead, I'm embracing all the parts of myself, the strong and the vulnerable, the serious and the silly. As I write this final update, sitting by the window in my new condo with Luna curled up beside me, I feel a sense of peace. The journey hasn't been easy, but I'm grateful for where it's led me. I'm excited to see what the future holds, knowing that whatever comes, I have the strength to face it.